Now, time to return to my favorite and only topic that I know much about, and that is politics. Now, luckily, as I said this morning, it is often stated that all politics is local, but the reality is that any party forms a government based on support across the country, and then at some point, those issues that are relevant to people in other parts of the country are going to find their way into government policy, with which we are going to be affected. So it's advisable for us to know about the issues as they are affecting people in other parts of Canada as well. And in that respect, we have Sandra Filosof-Schipper on the line. She is a candidate from Vancouver area for People's Party of Canada. Sandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darshan.
I wanted to get a sense, as I said in the introduction, I wanted to get a sense of certain issues that are commonly applicable across the country, but they affect people in different ways, or at least they are perceived in a different way. A couple of things that are top of the mind for me, of course, rule of law, as we saw this morning, the Ethics Commissioner issuing his findings and finding Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in violation of Conflict of Interest Act. So that is law and order situation.
Yeah,
and
that is interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. I mean, that can be classified as an understatement.
I have to wonder what is going to come of that.
I'm also kind of entertaining the possibility that the writ may get dropped early because of that.
That could happen.
Yeah, it could happen. Another issue.
Happen early, or what do you think? Any chance that he'll resign over this?
No, he's not going to resign. We have seen enough indications to see that he is pretty confident of his position. Whether we like that position or not, we have to acknowledge that he is confident of his position. Another issue that affects all of us is immigration. And that is, talked about from various angles. And here in the Greater Toronto area, of course, a very major pocket where immigrants tend to settle. The other one being in your area. So I was particularly keen to have the perception that the ordinary people have over there of the levels of immigration and how it impacts on them. What do you say?
Well, I think from the average man on the street, from what I talk to, and people in our riding are against this kind of open, very porous border immigration policies.
Mm-hmm.
We need to not necessarily limit it, but to catch our breath. Immigration in Canada has traditionally come in waves, and we've just experienced a very big wave. So it's not just immigration, it's refugees. And unfortunately, the government has decided to make this into a single body rather than separating them into immigrants and refugees. Immigrants and refugees are two separate groups, and the RRCC just exists as one. Two separate groups with different needs.
Right.
So I think it's a mistake to lump them in together. So in our neighborhood, people do want to catch our breath, slow down, and make sure that immigration is merit-based, and I think that's okay. We do need to bring in people. There's no question, but we need to bring in people that can serve Canada's needs. And everyone that isn't that person is a refugee, and they have different needs. For instance, I just read on the StatsCan website that 80% are getting public assistance. And that's fine. That is fine. They're refugees. They're running from terrible places. They've had to pick up their stuff and come with almost empty-handed.
Right.
So I think it behooves us to help these people out. But it is a hard dollar cost.
Right.
It costs, every single one of them costs us money to shelter them, process them, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to make sure they are settled, make sure they are working, make sure they are participating and enjoying Canadian life. It's great here. The more I travel, the more I see, we are so lucky to have Canada.
Definitely. But, one issue that I have, and I have to make my definitions very clear, which is there are immigrants, then there are refugees who are legally processed.
The IRCC conflates them, and I think that's a big mistake.
No, even beyond that, because, all the people that are pouring across the border without any documents, no prior notice of arrival, I openly call them illegals. I don't call them irregulars. Now, what's happening in this part of Canada is very well reported. But I was surprised to learn that something.
Ontario?
Yeah, in Quebec and Ontario. That is extensively reported, but I was surprised to learn through a couple of reports that came out that something similar, although on a smaller scale, is also going on in BC, where people are going to US on visit visa and just walking across. So, has this issue registered in your riding?
No, it is not. I don't know what the numbers are for that. Do you know? I'd be curious to know if this is something we need to be really worried about, or if this is an exceptional situation where it's just a few people doing this.
Yeah, I think a couple of.
No, our borders have been open with the U.S. very easy for many, many years, and that's fine. But the global situation is changing, so it's not just a matter of Canada and the U.S. anymore. Many other players are involved. So.
Yeah, but there have been a couple of convictions out in BC where people were brought in from China into United States. And
that is correct. That is correct. And so I'd be curious to know, and we will never know. I mean, the only reason we know this is because people were caught and convicted because some astute person working for the government processing these applications said, there are a lot of people living in this one place in Calgary, and then they did a little more digging. I think it was Calgary, and they found, this is all false. So these people were they're tantamount to human traffickers, if you ask me. They're not enslaving these people, but they're selling false Canadian entries, Canadian passports, basically a false Canadian citizenship. So. I would wonder how many of the people that they have bought these passports and citizenships, et cetera, actually knew they were buying falsified documents. I would have to question that.
Right.
So, and I also have to question, just because these guys got caught, how many are out there not getting caught?
Yeah, it's a logical question. Are we looking at the tip of the iceberg?
I wonder if this is it, or if we're looking at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely. There is always the possibility. Now, one of the unexpected areas from which negative feedback is coming as regards our overall immigration policy. Regarding international students, I came across an article, this was a few months ago, I think, in the Vancouver Sun, about the Indo-Canadian community not being happy with the number of students that were coming from India, international students. Now, that was
not happy as in they're too few or too many?
Too many.
Oh.
And secondly, numbers was only one part of that. The other part was that these people are not willing to integrate with the local culture. Now, this brings into sharp focus the point that Maxime Bernier made when he was here in Mississauga a couple of weeks ago. I think it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
About extreme multiculturalism. Now,
Yes, I've heard him call it the cult of multiculturalism. And let me just say right here, I love multiculturalism because it has afforded my immigrant family a great life.
Right.
But, and probably yours too.
Yes, definitely.
That's great. But I have to stress that my family came here to be Canadian.
Right.
It wasn't to bring pieces of our original country here, or certainly not to impose that on anyone else, and certainly not to just be friends or work with people in our own community. My mom didn't speak a word of English. She spoke other languages, of course. She's an educated woman, but she had to learn English, and then she's got many, many friends from many different places, and that's great. My dad went to American school, so he already spoke English. It wasn't a problem. But learning English, it was understood. It never occurred to my mom not to speak English.
Right.
And I didn't even speak English, but I was a child. It was easier.
Right.
So I think people coming to Canada must be coming to embrace what we value. And I say the collective we, which includes every religion, every skin color, every previous nationality. Do you or do you not embrace equality? Do you or do you not embrace a work ethic? Are you here to forever be on the public dollar? Like you see this in the UK, where you have people, multi-generation of welfare, making children and getting more welfare. welfare is good. It's a social safety net. It's not a career option.
That's a good way of putting it.
Well, that's just it. And I'd certainly want welfare or unemployment insurance, et cetera, to be there for me if I happen to fall on my face.
Right.
So it needs to exist. But for people coming from places that don't have such things, and you start offering them free stuff, honestly, it's not their fault. They'd be silly not to accept it.
Right.
Right? No one's going to say no to free stuff, and then it becomes a habit. So we have to make sure that the people that are already here are productive, are enjoying and participating in Canadian life. I would hate for these refugees or immigrants both to feel isolated,
right,
that they're only seeking out people from their own background and not really enjoying the wonderful things Canada has to offer. Like, every kid's on a hockey team or a soccer team or taking piano lessons, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I think that's an important part of Canadian life, where it's expected that you will be literate and go to school, and it's the law. I like that. But, some places, they don't think women need education. That's not okay. It's not okay, and I don't want to tell someone to think, but the daughter of someone like that, a man or woman, doesn't have to be a man, what chance does she have to compete in the Canadian world?
Right.
If she's not well prepared with egalitarian values? The values become actions.
Right.
If you have a thought, it becomes an action.
That's right.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
or else
but
you're just a member of a book club.
Yeah, unfortunately, we already have several ethnic silos in various parts of this country, and we see.
I think it's a little more severe where you are, and we're pretty mixed up in my riding, and it's great. Thank you very much. We like it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, but just as we have them here in the GTA, I also read, this was a while back, but there was some report about a certain part, I think it was in Richmond, BC, where a certain area, all the signs were only in Chinese. And
yeah, they were only in Chinese, and some people were displeased about that. And I think it's, excuse me, I think there are two sides to that. I think it's a valid point where here in BC, I'm expected to... anything official also has to be in French, and sometimes in native languages.
Yes.
And if you're in a predominantly Chinese area, and it's not only Chinese areas, anyone could go buy land or open a store, et cetera, in Richmond. There's certainly no legislation about that.
Right.
That they should have to do something in one of the official languages. People who oppose this opposition are saying all they're doing is marketing to their market. So we would market to the we'd make signage that's directed to the market there. So which sounds a lot more innocuous. But I don't know. I think it might contribute to isolation.
But it also sometimes seeps into public life. For example, when there was this by-election in which Jagmeet Singh won his seat in the parliament, the former Liberal candidate was, found to have put out a message to the Chinese communities there saying, "I am the only Chinese candidate." Yeah. In this by-election. So it will seep into public life. That is my view. What do you think?
I think absolutely it will seep into public life. I mean, politicians are there to represent people, whether they do or not is something different. Oftentimes they end up representing themselves, but I'm not one of them, by the way. So no, I agree with that. And I think that was a little bit of an egregious thing to say. I think the PPC policy is to take race completely out of discussion. And I was saying in another in a meeting that was being filmed that when I grew up here, we didn't really consider people's race or religion. It didn't come into play. It just didn't come up.
Right.
We were individuals, and it was great. It was a very peaceful way to live.
Right.
But now everyone's so painfully aware of everyone else's race or religion. I can't say this around this person. Well, if you can't say it around that person, you probably shouldn't say it at all.
Right.
and and you know, et cetera. And I don't like being pushed in a position when I look at an individual, all I see is their skin color.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I don't appreciate that, and I certainly don't want to be looked at my religion because of my religion or my gender. I want to be. I want to be considered for my ideas and my achievements, my failures, whatever it is, everything that makes up me. I don't want to be just the female or this immigrant or that religion. I find it insulting to be considered, to be narrowed into such a small category when we should be judged on our merits.
I think we have reached a point where we have ceased to be persons and started being a particular identity, and then within that identity there is no variation possible, which is the opposite of diversity actually.
It's a lack of diversity of thought. It's only a diversity of skin color, and that's all you are to other people, and all while patting themselves on the back or for not being racist. They're aware of nothing but race, but they're saying everyone else is a racist. I think it's horrible.
Yeah, you know, I remember
reverse racism. There's no such thing. It is racism.
Yeah, I remember one discussion I was in where I was asked what my view of the matter was as a South Asian.
As a South Asian.
So I said I have an opinion as a Canadian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and there is no such thing as the South Asian opinion because among South Asians there is difference of opinion.
Is that even allowed?
Well, I pride myself on saying unpopular things, but let's...
And you're the one with the radio show, so it must be a good idea.
Right. Now, let's turn to another thorny issue, which is property prices in your neck of the woods. And
indeed.
And its connection with people who are not frankly Canadian. They are not even immigrants or any kind of Canadian. They are pure foreigners and they are buying a property, driving up prices, and therefore putting them out of reach for me.
People, and it's not the only problem. So I just want to, before I even start on this, and say that we have other problems other than certain people, foreign entities buying property and parking their money. Now, in a very general way, I'm not averse to foreign purchases of property as long as it is an investment. So, say you're a foreigner and you want to buy a property in Vancouver, and the reason you're buying this property is so that you can rent it out. That's a true investment. It also does not deplete the inventory of available properties to rent or buy. Say you bought it, just you're trying to make revenue from it. Great. So now there's one more rental property on the market, and you will rent it at market rate. So if I buy the property next door and rent it out for $100 less, well, I'm going to be the one that's getting the deal. So you're going to have to meet my price. The market will dictate the price.
Right.
So what is not happening is that a lot of the time, a lot of these people are trying to hide their money from their own governments. So they're parking money. So parking is not an investment. They're just putting it somewhere for safekeeping. It's the economic equivalent of stuffing your money under a mattress. So when the people do that, they're parking their money. They've got a lot more money to play with than the average working Canadian, for one. But they are depleting the available inventory. Right. And so they're upping the price because they're buying, and they're not putting into a rental pool. So available housing diminishes, which invariably hikes up the price of the other available properties, because as inventory decreases, price increases. Right. Assuming demand remains the same. Yeah, so that is what's going on there. It's not as big a percentage as is made out to be. Okay. So I think our big problem is not just that, but our big problem is taxation. The Horgan NDP are treating us like ATMs. Okay. I'm not even joking. This is an exaggeration. It's horrible. The increase in property taxes does not take into consideration a person's income, a person's equity, meaning how much they owe and how much they own. It doesn't take into consideration at all. And they have suggested that if you can't afford the taxes, you can move. As if moms and dads are going to say, "Hey, kids, pack up. We got to move. Government needs more of our money." Or old people that haven't worked in many years, that have lived in the same house for decades, and they're supposed to pack up and move to pay taxes. Do we live in a fiefdom? It's unbelievable. They're using this, and people are saying you can move. And then the other suggestion was you can borrow. I need to borrow money to pay taxes, that because my house has increased in value. So we're not paying our taxes, obviously, on the original value. We're also not paying our taxes based on income, like an income tax, which would be progressive. So people are having to move.
Well,
I think it's horrible. Is your home not sacred? What is the function of government? It's to protect us from tyrannical acts. It's not to implement them.
That sounds like a horrible thing to say. I assume when you are saying it that Mr. Horgan did make that statement.
It was not him directly. It was someone related. I can't even remember who it was. It was a couple of years ago. But I went to a protest, and counter-protests appeared. And good, that's fine. That is the right of a Canadian. Protest and counter-protest. But these people just had no sympathy for families that would have to dump their home. They had no sympathy for people that cannot afford the taxes. We could afford the house. We could afford the mortgage. That's what our planning was. It wasn't just poor planning. We had planned. Everybody plans. And then all of a sudden, only the very rich, the very, very rich, will be able to keep their house. In Canada, I think the top 1% is something about $190,000 income. So, which is a hell of a nice living.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not gajillionaire levels of money.
Yeah.
That's someone earning that much money would have to sell their house to cover the taxes. Or incur debt. So, which means you're not leaving your children anything.
Right.
You're depleting your own equity in your home. Which means sometimes people use that equity to borrow money to fix the roof, or to fix anything, or to renovate something that's failing. And that means those things are not going to be an option anymore because we'll have maxed our credit to pay tax. It's tyrannical.
No, that can never be allowed to happen. This reminds me of...
It has.
Yeah.
With people's blessing. I remember arguing with some guy at this protest I was telling you about. He says, your house is worth $3 million or something. Well, I promise you I didn't pay $3 million for it. I've been living in it for a long time.
Yeah.
And so you want me to move? And who's going to buy the house?
That's right.
They're taxing us on money we don't have, and they're taxing us on past money because that's your investment. And they're taxing us on future earnings. So now we have to shift our money that would have gone into our RSPs or paying down debt, our mortgages, and give it to the government. And for what? What are we getting? It's the same thing as going to the mall and dropping a big bundle of money and walking out empty-handed. That's what we're doing.
This reminds me of Alberta NDP, Ms. Notley, when she implemented a carbon tax, and when people objected that this would make fuel too expensive, she suggested that they could walk. So,
they could walk. This is absurd. And Canada is almost the biggest country in the world, and she wants us to walk. So I think she should get on her, walk me over some Alberta steaks. Please, go ahead, get going. I'm having a barbecue.
Yeah. Now, lastly,
how you know what that makes me think of? Marie Antoinette saying, "Let them eat cake."
Yeah,
that's what that is.
Yeah,
it's not even a matter of stupidity. It's just incredibly cold.
Right. Now, lastly, let's talk about this whole trade-off between, the environmental issues on the coast of BC and the pipelines from out of Alberta.
Yes.
What stand does People's Party take on how to resolve this?
We are pro-pipeline, and let me clarify this. We're being accused of all sorts of things. Climate change denier, which is now a religion. We're not deniers. Some people are, but there are people that are all over the place. But we certainly reject the hysteria. And as for the pipeline, we are for it for the simple reason that the world is nowhere near an oil-free economy. We want to be there. Everyone wants to be there.
Right.
Everyone wants to be there. But we've got to... We can't. It's not like turning off a switch. We would literally turn off the switch to everyone's life. And all oil does not go to driving. It goes to manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I think only, I want to say 40%, don't quote me on that, goes to gas to fuel your car. Everything else is in manufacturing, et cetera.
Right.
So we're not there. Our society, the whole world, we're not anywhere near an oil-free economy. Until that time, and we should be working toward it, and a lot of people are. A lot of the scientific world is working toward green energy and alternate products. But until we are at that point where we can actually replace oil, I think Canada needs to be the best at it.
Right.
We need to be the best at it. We need the jobs. If we're not creating surplus, financial surplus, we're not going to help anybody, including the oil-free economy sector, because we're not going to have the investment money, because we'll be poor.
Right.
Every good thing comes out of having surplus funds. That way we can fund charity, we can fund scientific initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. You have to have extra.
Right.
So people are scared for the wildlife on our coast, and I agree. One of my favorite things in life is to play outside. I'm an avid diver, and I like to ride horses in the wilderness. That's my thing. So I do care.
Right.
And we remember the days of the Exxon Valdez spill. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was horrific.
Yes.
It was horrific. But it did spur lots of regulatory changes in the industry. So now all boats coming around here are double hulled, which is huge in terms of preventing spills. So the estimates are that if we did build this pipeline, we would be having we'd have about 30, about one tanker a day, which I think is manageable. I think, and to be honest, who else would you rather have in charge of this than Canadians? We will be responsible. We will be more responsible than other players in the oil world.
Right.
We will do it better.
Right.
It's because of our views on nature and how much we value it. And I mean, Canada's a gorgeous natural place.
Right.
And it's not just how it looks. We have to protect ecosystems because ultimately we're protecting ourselves.
Right.
And I believe that. So I think the pipeline could be managed responsibly. And we've come such a long way since the Exxon Valdez, and there have been pipeline issues, but in the past. But I think we can really address all those shut-off valves, et cetera, segments, shut-offs and segments. There's no reason why we can't just be the best at it until we're at a place where we can have an oil-free economy. I was looking at private companies just around here that are there's one here, Ballard Power, that's looking at alternate sources of energy, and we're looking at a carbon capture company up in Squamish, which is just on the way to Whistler Mountain. And I think we need to be looking at these companies. The solutions are going to come out of there. Anything else that is going to be restricting people is I'm more concerned about the people in the world that are energy poor.
Right.
Does that make sense? I want to make sure they have light and are able to import the food they need, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So I'm hearing, let's put huge tariffs on countries that don't have green policies. Well, do you want all those people to starve that live there? They need jobs. This is more let them eat cake.
Yeah.
I think the carbon. I don't know. It's a religion. Is going too far. They're not seeing the big picture. They're not seeing starving people. They're not seeing every tree being cut down for heat. and people are saying, well, yeah, and there's your carbon scrubbers. We need the trees.
Right.
We need the trees. And they're going to be cut down for fuel, for firewood.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you for clearing that up, Sandra. It's been fun having you and very...
It's been half an hour.
Very informative. Yeah. Well, you and I both are professional talkers, so we don't realize.
I didn't know that about myself.
Well, now you found out.
Well, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to hear us out and us being the PPC.
Well, it was important, as I said up top, that, it's important to get the perspective from other parts of the country because normally we are talking about local issues, but there are other issues that need to be factored into our thinking as well. So thank you for providing your perspective.
And thank you for having me.
Most welcome.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That was Sandra Filosof-Schipper, PPC candidate from Vancouver area. running in this election and giving her insights on what is important to voters over there. I'll see you on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.